Okay, so here's the real deal. I grow tired every year of Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday because it's a time when we often like to remember a personality instead of the movement of which he was not the leader, only one of many great figures therein. It's a time for me of sorrow because I remember that we don't have a Rosa Parks Day. We have no Malcolm X Day. We have no 4 little girls in Birmingham Church Day. We have no Black Panthers Day, those people who gave us the free breakfast program. No, we have the holiday that honors the leader that we have so rightfully sanitized, that we can remember him not speaking those words that you heard in our chalice lighting, not those words that you heard earlier in the I Have a Dream speech, because the sound bite always goes to the later part, where we talk about a dream without a plan, where we talk about something that's not actionable, instead of the clear demands that the leader was making around justice for all people that begins with the collective liberation of Black peoples. MLK Jr. Sunday is hard for me because I have to remember his words. So we remember them together. He said that people are asking Black people to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. But what they're truly advocating is socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. That's a hard truth to sit in. That's a hard truth to sit in when we still consider that Black people proportionately are still the poor in this nation. There's no real distinction between poverty and Blackness in MLK's time. And although it looks a little bit different on this island, I was having this conversation with my mother last night, because of the professions that many Black people have here, we don't experience the same level of economic oppression, although we still experience oppression on the basis of race and ethnicity. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. We're overrepresented in our incarceration system. We have to remember his words, the words of a proud anti-capitalist who, just like Jesus of yesteryear and just like Gandhi a little bit after that, was killed because when you mess with people's money, they come after you. When you mess with people's economic system, they come after you. When you say there's enough to go around and you believe that all you have is what people want, and people are going to take what you've earned either through thievery or maybe even hard-earned work of some ancestor not too long past. But when we start hoarding the resources instead of realizing that there is indeed enough to feed every need, that there is enough to make sure that everyone has equal educational outcomes, that we do actually have the ability to meet people where they are, mind, body, and soul. When we forget and you remind people, we have attention. And so we have to remember his words. We have to remember these words that there are not insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity in this nation. And I want to kind of pull us back from the idea of opportunity. This is a very George W. Bush type of not equal affirmative action, but affirmative access type of thing. All right, the opportunities aren't guaranteed. They never were. If they were, there would be a tried and true path to get there. We'd be Methodists if that were the only truth. There's a method to it, right? But that's not the only truth that there is. There are a variety of outcomes that we all want to engage in, and there are a variety of ways that we keep doing the same thing over and over again until we get there. But we have to remember Martin Luther King Jr.'s words that now is the time to make justice a reality for all God's children, for all that there is and all that there will be. He is not only talking about the human condition, he is talking about all that there is and all that will come, because it would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment and to underestimate the determination of its colored citizens. I've had the honor and privilege of working in diverse cohorts of people of color. Here he's referring specifically to Black people, but we can interpret his words more broadly. When we undo the strictures of anti-Blackness, we have to acknowledge that we are still living in a racial hierarchy, a racial categorization that keeps Black people all the way at the bottom and other communities of color somewhere in between, although we're all on the same team. We're fighting the lie that we are, in fact, separate instead of one. I want to move on from this man, not only because he wasn't the only voice in the Black civil rights movement or of any of the civil rights movements of the 60s that led into different actions in the 70s, 80s, and brings us to the current day. Because we can spend a lot of time thinking back about what he said and what he did without remembering that we have to do what he was asking us to do, without remembering that the point was to create more Black joy. So before we get to an update on the state of Black joy, which I think is a more accurate way to observe his works, his legacy, and what we can continue to do, I need us to remember that at the end of his life, Dr. King, who was killed at the same age that I am right now, got very clear about the pathway forward. He told us about three evils that continue to inform the work of the Poor People's Campaign today. And those evils are racism, the lie that skin color and ethnic heritage carry anything more than a nice and beautiful way to make sure that we know that we're not all one person, although we can be one body. That we had to watch out for growing materialism, an obsession with things, consumer culture, as opposed to humanism, which is not the spiritual humanism we're used to talking about here in the sanctuary, but the actual centering of human beings in reality over things. We're seeing this really clearly in the battle over AI and intellectual property right now, right? When we strip the ideas from the people, they become things that we can just play with. But people had those ideas. People made that visual art. And there's a piece of them that exists in that we can't just strip out. So he warned us about being careful around an obsession with things and the economy, as well as militarism. He was very clear about the encroaching military-industrial complex that has only expanded since his time. We've worked against it time and time again, but it keeps coming up. And we have to hold that intention with, it is a brave and courageous thing to be willing to sacrifice one's own life. Slow down. Spirit's moving in me. It is a bold and courageous thing to be willing to sacrifice one's own life for what you truly believe in. But the willingness to kill to preserve that belief is also part of militarism. That's an uncomfortable truth that we are called to hold each and every day. And finally, something that he didn't actually say, but is embedded deep down in that message and has become central to the Poor People's Campaign in the here and now, is warnings about the destruction of the earth our environment, all of these things, when we separate ourselves as people from the land, we can commit violence against the land. When we have more militarism, the land is always a casualty. And we engage in racism. Racism, as we understand it, is about people and place, and we've seen it right here on our beloved chain of islands. When we can dehumanize people, we can take land away from them and make sure that we don't understand sustainable ways to engage in one another. So while he did not clearly articulate that, we see what happens with unbound militarism, such as the oil that we stored in Red Hill for so long that continues to contaminate our place even as we drain it. The wildfires on Maui, which are in part because of runaway tourism and capitalism, right? We see how all of these work together. All of these inform the state of Black joy today, because this is the antidote. This is what we've always been working toward. We've been working towards a way where Black people, me and mine, can know a way where we are fully and boldly loved into ourselves. You've heard it from this pulpit before because I say it all the time. I last said it around Juneteenth, that from Southerners on the ground, that the mandate for Black people right now is to avenge the suffering of our ancestors, to earn the respect of future generations, and to be willing to be transformed in the process. We all play a role in that. However much Black you do or don't have in you, we all have a role in making sure that we can earn the respect of future generations and know how to love Blackness in all of its complexities. We also have to acknowledge, in a culture that is obsessed with capitalism and materialism, it allows us to avoid rest. It speeds us along. It says that justice is so urgent that the only thing we can do is make more justice. But if we're always concerned with making more justice, we forget that we have to do that work together. If every action, every parade, every single letter writing campaign needs your stamp of approval, what are we going to do when you die? That's not sustainable justice making. It takes all of us to move forward, and that means it takes all of us to remind one another it is time for rest, and rest is a strategy of resistance. The Knapp Ministry writes in Rest is Resistance, a manifesto, some things that I think can help us and are specific to Black people here. That productivity should not look like exhaustion. The concept of laziness is a tool of the oppressor. A large part of your unraveling from capitalism will include becoming less attached to the idea of productivity and more committed to the idea of rest. Portal to just be. Just be, I say to Black people, just be. I remind you to hold Black people in our tenderness. Just be, because we're already enough. The ministry continues. Do not let your lack of money and possessions make you feel negative about your worth as a human being. Do not let your credit score, man-made poverty, and or racism define your extreme power. We all come from the same source, which is powerful beyond all power we have imagined. To that source we might return, but in the interim, we have more power together. And there's nothing that can get in our way of human creation to create more human ways forward, together with our understanding of the divine, whatever that is. We can just be and just live into the extreme power that we have together. The ministry also offers that you must resist anything that doesn't center your divinity as a human being. You are worthy of care. This is something we hold so dearly as Unitarian Universalists. You are, each and every one of you, worthy just because. Black people, there is nothing you need to do to earn your worthiness. It is our birthright, and it's what we will work for more of, because future generations need us to do what we can, restfully, to make sure that there is an abundance of rest in the future, to make sure that there is an ever-widening circle of justice in the future. And so I offer you what is often left out of our soundbite of the Reverend Dr. King's dream. We also need a plan. I love Disney, and yes, dreams really can come true, but you need a freaking plan. All right, so we need some goals to make sure that we're checking back in and some parameters against which to assess those things. And so I'm going to assess our plan, this state of Black joy, this state of collective liberation, in terms of our own congregational mission. Dr. King, the NAP ministry, and so many other sources of Black liberation tell us that in our justice system, specifically here on our beloved islands where we're 11th from the bottom in terms of our proportion of Black population. There 3.6% of our population is Black. However, Black people are represented more than twice as much in our prison system as white people, and more than 10 times as much as Latinx people in our prison system. So in order to embrace a plan of justice in the state of Black joy, we have to assume that there is discrimination in our legal system. We need to move away from proving through the strictures of a racist system that the system is racist and just agree that it is so. To move forward with compassion in Black liberation, we need to accept that we may never know the contours and crevices of the suffering that each one of us is holding. Especially Black people for whom the assault on our lives is daily and consistent. Sometimes we don't even have the words to give voice to the pain that we're holding. Sometimes we have become so numb to the pain, just the same way we ignore the buzzing of the refrigerator or the sight of our own nose, which we can see all the time. Because it's just the way we have learned to be. We can be compassionate and empathetic and knowing we won't ever know all of the experience of another. And to move forward with Black joy, we can remember that rest is resistance. The fierce urgency of now also demands that we take the time we need to nourish our bodies and our souls with silence, with rest, and with the company of other people in the struggle. And so I offer this. The state of Black joy in our time is strong, and it's getting better and better every day. Each one of us has a role in making sure that we perpetuate Black joy through compassion, justice, and joy itself. We can do that by never forgetting the three evils of racism, materialism, and militarism, as well as their impact on our planet. And remember that that means that there is always discrimination in our legal system. Till we build a new one, it's going to function exactly the way it's designed. We can remember that we will never know all of the experience of one another, but we can know what we do know, and we can do our best to be more empathetic to one another. And when we're making Black joy, we have plenty of downtime. We need to make sure that everyone has a turn at the Kiki, flipping over the grill, turning back some vegan brats, whatever it is that brings you joy. The state of Black joy is strong today. And may liberating Black joy be with you this day and every day as we remember the divine legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Amen. Ashe, and blessed be.